cigarettes?
Ugh, I wish.
Yeah.
Got my last one here.
I think plans changed.
Yeah.
You know, you can
I
put
don't
some
know.
more pep in your step, Bailey. It's okay.
I can fill you in.
I'm sorry, are you blaming me for being old?
What's your ping?
A little
Respect
bit,
your
yeah.
elders. Come on now. How you doing, Judge?
I'm just fine. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
Hey, how many judges did you shoot up today?
No. I'm just waking up, actually.
Oh, yeah. Lying isn't your strong suit.
And if I did, obviously not too many, right? I think we got the remaining judges here.
Oh,
This is pretty
there's
much
not too many of us left,
almost.
to be honest.
Yeah, this is actually almost every remaining judge. I think we're missing like 2.
Just Gatsby, right?
She was awake earlier,
Gatsby
and then she went back into her apartment to go watch daytime soaps or whatever.
Yeah. There's some
Norman,
couple probationary
how
judges.
are you, Norman?
Okay, I'm doing well.
Last time I saw you, you were slanging and banging in the courthouse.
Yeah. Last time I saw you, you were doing the same.
Well, that's neither here nor there. I mean, this is about the future, right?
It is.
Well, who knows
Yes,
what
it
it's
is.
about, honestly. I do have some questions if we want to start kicking off things. I'd be curious, specifically for the judges, and I mean, I guess the lawyers. Is the only law we have the Constitution and the legislation and the penal code?
That's basically everything. Yeah. If it's not legislation, penal code, or yeah, if it's not in those areas, it's not really law. So.
Okay, and
Correct.
out of curiosity, the case that was thrown out today, what do you think the reason for that would have been? If you could, say, if you're allowed to, that is. I don't know if that's crossing the line, but maybe we could hypothetical it if we really had to look at it that way.
I should point out that he's the only one who can speak on his reasoning, and considering he resigned, the only way we can really glean from his reasoning is what he posted on the docket.
Cross resigned?
We don't want to be putting words into his mouth at this point. It's just-
Right. I know what was said, and that's what I'm saying. It's just my worry is, and it's even to do with my prosecution, is if we're to throw something out or even prosecute somebody, and there's not the written specifics of the legislation or the law that was broken in the sentencing on the docket or whatever, how is it possible that anybody would trust, what is said in something like that?
What do you mean? Like, how could they have trust in the institution itself?
Right. So consider mine. Obviously, I was screaming while I was getting my sentencing. But if there is no fundamental argument to why,
so what is this
there
meeting?
is,
I don't know.
Jurisdiction for the police officers up there, written at the end of the court proceedings, how is anybody to trust or respect the outcome of that, or understand what the law was that was broken?
Well,
Sure. So I can speak to that. As you just acknowledged, a lot of the at the end there was 5 minutes of you and I yelling back and forth with each other, where I was attempting to establish that verdict, read it out clearly so that you could understand, and obviously you were in disagreement at the time. Could it have been published? Yes. Do I still have it? Yes, and I can do so. It's not an issue.
Well, it's not so much only that. I mean, yes, that would help, but at the same time, if you were to post something on the docket, are we able to then use that as a reference, or like what sort of law would that even be deemed as? Is it? It's not precedent, obviously, but.
Soze, could you speak up by chance?
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, it'd be precedent. I can give you an example. Like for Mr. Ferrara here, he had a court case just this afternoon. He appealed the matter for trace smoke, where the police arrested him and charged him with felony obstruction of justice because he refused to track his motorcycle that was stolen. because they thought it was going to lead to the to the apprehension of someone who had assaulted a police officer. I ruled that was wrong. I ruled that the individuals still had their Miranda rights, regardless of whether they were a victim or a suspect or anything otherwise. And I articulated as such on the docket, right? That's all spelled out there. It's all spelled out in plain text. And now, if Mr. Ferrara or any of the attorneys here have a case like that going forward, something where something similar is charged, they can cite that filing and they can introduce it as evidence.
Right. My question would be, though, is if our Constitution and legislation is the law, and the only law that we impose, is your opinion of how the law should be enough to justify something changing like that? For instance, if you believe something of guilt has to be over a certain level, why is this not a part of our due process? Why do we not understand what our guilt requirements is? If it isn't law, then how do we enforce or enact something like that?
Because at some point the legislative branch or the judicial branch is left to interpret the laws that have been established, right?
Right.
There's a certain matter of interpretation that's required. If I were to look at that as plainly using the same example of, oh, he didn't give information to the police and the police weren't able to get the the arrest on this guy. Did he obfuscate information? Technically, on a literal sense, yes. But you have to take that part and parcel with the recognized common law through Miranda v. Arizona and make that interpretation that even though he could have done something, we have laws on the books that say that he was not required to. There has to be some level and amount of interpretation that goes into the matter.
Okay. So, if I was to ask you based on, obviously, I'm going to be very biased in my opinion, where in legislation would you say that there is jurisdiction for any LEO in Blaine County?
So the thing that we drew on in making that verdict specifically was the PCP 2.0, which had empowered the powers that were sitting at the time.
Just before you go further, can you just read the first line of the PCP 2.0?
Sure. Grab my tablet here. In an effort to bring the various law enforcement departments acting within the boundaries of Los Santos into the blanket of checks and balances that every integral branch of government presently enjoys.
That's what are the boundaries of Los Santos?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because that's what I was going through when I made the verdict, right? Go to the third bullet point under examples of powers that the mayor's office reserves, where it reads, quote, the formation of other law enforcement departments as the need arises in other regions of Los Santos beyond the city. Coverage is important.
Right, but you see it says an example of power that they reserve, which means for them to apply the power, it has to be done through legislation. It isn't just created because they have the power to do it. So, for instance, if you in your constitution, it says you have the authority to create legislation, that doesn't mean the legislation is created until it's created. So why exactly would an example of power be equal to the power when the first sentence exactly says that Los Santos and its boundaries is the current law enforcement area?
Because again, it requires some amount of interpretation rather than it is anything spelled out clearly, sir. That is my opinion, and I'll stick to it.
Right.
And I believe that we're going to fundamentally disagree there.
Well, here's
right.
Here's,
so I'm
right. So
just,
hold on. Because of that, right? And this is a foul. I'm sorry. You need to be dramatic over there, Murphy.
Oh no, I was just trying to get comfortable.
Oh, all right. Well, and I think you understand at this point, and I've had multiple conversations with yourself and other individuals that it is, once again, open to interpretation. Would be someone else that does it differently. He does it differently than I would as well. But with that being said, the fact that it was argued does beget an actual conversation as to, well, if it's not clear and if we are disagreeing, then there needs to be a commonality that we can agree upon, which is something that we have been diligently working on. And I mean, I don't think it's quite ready to share, but I can give you some of that information if, as a result of a fair amount of this.
I think it's the issue that arises. I understand the interpretation of the law, but what law are you interpreting? Are you interpreting the... No, this man over here, you said it's his interpretation of the law. Are you interpreting the example of powers as the law?
Well, the empowerment was to create that department. Then the commissioner went about through that role and created that department being
Right.
the BCSO. That would be an execution of the powers outlined within that legislation.
Right. So why would somebody, if they had the power to do that, need to write it when it's DOC? Why was that legislation created to empower them and have that jurisdiction?
The DOC legislation came prior to the... I can't speak for the decisions of the council. Maybe Mr. Walker there could...
Right, but you're missing the point. Why do they have to define jurisdiction in legislation for it to be legitimate, but this man doesn't, if it's the same authority? You understand the point? So it's not that your interpretation of the law is wrong. You're interpreting a law that doesn't exist yet. That's the problem. If you were to say to somebody, and this is why the people are fucking insanely furious with things like this, if you can't justifiably point out the legislation or law that you're referring to that's written, then it isn't law. How do you have jurisdiction? So think about the precedent you set here. If something says you have the power to do something, that means that you are currently within that power. So if I have the power to become the president, why am I not the president right now, sir?
Because the process would need to be detailed for that in order to occur. The process was detailed for the creation of the department within the same legislation that I'm referring.
As an example, yes.
It's all encompassing throughout the entirety.
Well, if I have the power to become the president, there's an example in which I could do it, then I should be the president. What's the difference? I don't understand how you can argue that.
See, because you're speaking in hypotheticals now, and I don't know that that's particularly constructive.
Well, it isn't a hypothetical, because I could become the president of the United States of America, right? It's within my rights to be able to do that. Why would I not be able to do that?
I mean, I would ask you to point to me where we have that legislated, though.
Well, we're talking about America, the country, not our law. If I went over to New York and I was living there and I had the rights, like everybody else, to become president, I'm not the president until I have enacted that and it is written. The law, legislation, right? So if I have the power to create a police department and I don't write it down in legislation, then why would it exist yet? I don't understand how you argue this.
Again, it's a matter of interpretation at some point. And we can go in circles around. We can go in circles on this.
Well, this is the problem.
Towards
Which
what John was referring.
Important point.
It's a very important point. So, so an example of power to you means that is created already. That's what you're saying, right? In your interpretation, an example of power means it is created.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's already been created. There was some time that lapsed between the PCP passing and the creation of the department itself. Now, again,
Right.
I can't speak to the specifics of how that happened. Again, maybe Mr. Walker over there might be able to refer you to, as he's sitting on the council. He would be aware as being part of the mayor's office. Maybe he could
Okay.
inform you.
If a law isn't written, does it exist?
Does there need to be a law to establish a police department?
A jurisdiction, yes, there does actually.
Like why? What?
That's why it's written there.
So I'm okay. So can I ask like a clarifying question? Because why do you believe? Because it seems you're suggesting that not all law needs to be written, and that some laws are just inferred out of thin air. That's what I'm kind of
Well, no, there's
getting.
no inference. I'm pointing specifically
So
to
why-
a piece of legislation that was published.
Right, but are you disagreeing that law would need to underline the requirement for like a police department, jurisdictions, etc.?
No, I'm simply stating that the power was outlined in the legislation that was in question.
So where does it say
well,
they
I
have
guess
jurisdiction
the question,
in Wayne
I guess
County?
the question I'm asking, is in the creation of that department. Suppose the commissioner exercises that power. Is that required to be through legislation, or can they just do that with powers instilled by that legislation that already exists?
Well, it says you can create the department, but that isn't creating the jurisdiction and legislation. A department is a completely different authority to the jurisdiction that it's bound to.
Sure.
It's just
so again,
a separate,
it goes back
separate
to,
type of authority.
either way, what we've been working on in the days since, and John was starting to mention, are some overworks and overhauls to kind of patch up some of these matters that are being brought forward. John, you're going to be most familiar if you want to step into the conversation.
Yes. Give me a sec. There's quite a lot that has been transpiring over the last few days. I understand that there has been some unrest, actually a lot of unrest between individuals within this city, market individuals, it's okay right here, others that have taken actions upon themselves to prove their points. And as I've said on Twitter, verbally over there, your points have been heard. But believe me, I understand. And we understand where you are coming from with a lot of these. And with Soze's as well. What I don't want to have are these circular conversations where we keep going around the same thing. I'd like to move forward. And in a way so that is using the words that we have, not weapons. So first off, one thing that we have, and it's not 100% finalized, we're getting there, is revised constitution here. Where everything and anything that we create has to be referenced
Charcoal,
back
thank
to
you so much for
some
the 10
sort
gifted.
of what we have within the Constitution.
Hope
Whether
you're
that
well.
be the
Thank you so
basic
much.
human rights and freedoms, as well as, for example, right to healthcare, right to privacy, right to dignity, etc. Basically, any laws or legislation would then be returned to our basic human rights. Those can then be argued.
Oh,
in
Charcoal,
court,
thank you so much for 5 more.
through jurisprudence.
It's very much appreciated.
Those can be set as precedent as well. All these things will enable us and everybody to start shaping how we operate here. And you're talking about jurisdiction as well. We all have, as a collective on top of it, sat down and worked out a proposal for those jurisdictions. And we'll recognize multiple legislative authorities inside of the state. Now,
Urban
this is
Sports.
we are not the state.
Thank
We're-
you
these
so
are
much for the 10 gifted.
individualities that the state
Oh my
recognizes
gosh, guys.
as authorities. As such, it'll be 4 tentatively. These are still subject to change. These are
Very
not completely
appreciated. Thank you
finalized.
again.
One being the Department of Justice. Where we exist to enact and enforce. Second would
Top
be Blaine County.
Kill. What are you
And we'll
doing?
then
Thank you so much for
separate
the
Blaine
20
County into actually
gifted.
having their own mayorship,
Oh my
as
god.
well as Los Santos. 2 separate at that point. Now, should they agree in the 2 mayors of the 2 separate counties, or governances
Thank
at
you
this
so
point,
much.
actually coincide together and come together to
And Charcoal,
complete
thank you so much for the 2
some
more.
sort of law legislation, then it becomes known as statewide. Now, the state law is just statewide. I think we also will have the medical association as well. We call it the medical board. All these will be legislative authorities where, ideally, we have the ability to reference back to the Constitution and things that we are going to do. Y'all have the ability at some point as well, after all these things are implemented, to challenge these authorities. These are all things that are being worked on as we speak. But I can't work on these if you keep damn
Thank you
shooting us
guys
up
so
every damn
much for
time
all the
we walk
gifted
into a
subs.
courtroom.
Really appreciate it.
You understand what I'm saying?
We do.
Yes, Your Honor.
The reality, I think, for majority of the people and issue we have, it's not so much interpretations of the law, it's the reality in which we seem, well, not so much with you guys, but a lot of the judges, if you talk to them, it would be backhanded conversations and no sort of structure
A
or
lot of those
understanding
judges
or
are
wanting
gone
to
now,
understand.
To be fair.
Yeah.
Let's also announce this. Since the last week, individuals
I think
that
they're
have
just
left, not that I
talking
need to
about the new
publicize this by
constitution
any
and the
means, but I'm going to
reworking
do
of
it
it.
for the purpose of letting you know who actually exists right now. In the last week, we have had Cross step down. Rain has obviously resigned. Wielding Glory has also resigned. There has also been the
Willie.
removal of Habibi, who has not been around, and one other on top of it. There's at least 5 or 6 that have either been removed or stepped down to the point where you're looking kind of at a bare bones skeleton for the people that can actually do it at this point.
Well, if I may say, I think this is the right people to do it. I think the bad eggs have left the barn.
Sure. Can I say this? I think that this should recontextualize everything that we're discussing here.
No,
I
this is an
don't think it's
OC.
fair to sit here and harp upon the failings of the documentation of our past, and instead we should look to make things correct and move forward, so we don't need to worry about those inconsistencies and those incorrect documents that were holding us back in the past. Those things that didn't exist.
And if I'm,
yes, go ahead.
sorry, if I may say, as a civilian, criminal, whatever you want to call me, looking in, I think a lot of the issues came from the fact that there was a lot of holes in the legal system, and I think throughout the past few months here, there hasn't been many precedents set, and that left things a lot wide open for, a case by case or letter of the law, whatever you guys want to call it, which led to a lot of inconsistencies. And then down the line, here we are. There's corruption, there's chaos, and you just never know what you're gonna get.
Well, I can speak on that for a little bit. A lot of judges were not even aware that we were supposed to be essentially the second half of the legislative authority via our use of common laws and precedents being set. And that was a relatively new realization for pretty much all of us a few weeks ago. For the most part, we kind of left all of the legislation and that stuff up to the council. And with the council being so hamstrung in its ability to operate the last 2 months, it's left those holes that you mentioned. And
Angel, I'd
yeah.
like to add something that I happen to know is that
Sure.
also, the administration was very willfully trying to keep the judges from having any kind of checks and balance.
Well, I agree. I actually saw a formatted a constitutional amendment from Siobhan, which essentially wrote us out of it. So I'm aware of that.
They wanted you not to have authority.
They were attempting to usurp power through the pardon legislation, which did pass, giving the legislative branch full and final say over anybody who received a pardon. Mr. K, you'd be familiar.
It was actually more. It was actually more than that. They essentially were going to fold the Department of Justice as a proxy legislative authority of the council that answered to them. So
crazy, man.
So that's obviously not acceptable. And
did you guys have the jurisdiction to put them in jail for treason or what?
I do, probably. I mean, I could
That's
prosecute
insane.
people. So
You should.
I actually never really thought about it. I guess I could.
Well, I mean, at this point, what you're saying, Bailey? What are you implying with what's happening or what you're trying to do here? Like, what's the fundamental thing that's happening? What's the TLDR for everybody that is not us, the not so intelligent masses.
Yeah. Don't trick yourself there, Soze. You've argued things quite well. So, TLDR. We have an upcoming mayor election. It's going to be 2 mayors. We're going to have basic municipalities underneath those recognized areas. You're going to have Blaine County, you're going to have Los Santos. Each will have their own mayor. We have lawyers here that have the ability at this point, and we will be publishing guidance at some, hopefully soon, of how we can argue, interpret, or petition basically for laws to be enacted. Whether that be changed, whether those times be changed. At the same time, individuals that are elected, should they abuse the power that they are given, including myself and others, do have the power to undergo what is an authority review. No longer are individuals untouchable. They can be. So what we have is petitions that can be signed.
Including us, mind you.
Correct. We are not untouchable. I've been here for a long time. Please don't touch me. I like where I'm at. Just please don't kill me. Anyway, but we don't want unchecked power, and if something does get out of hand, there needs to be the balance around it. And if that balance doesn't exist, well, then we have, or democracy doesn't exist at that point.
Can I ask a question about the whole mayor situation? So there would be a mayor of essentially the city, and then a mayor of the North Pot, correct?
Of Blaine County.
Yep.
Yep.
And would that would the laws be slightly different in each area, or is it all going to be the same
Yes.
set of laws?
Each municipality will be able to set its own laws. They cannot supersede state law, but they can set their own individual laws for their jurisdiction. Yes.
So, for example, if you shoot someone up there in Sandy Shores versus if you shoot someone in the city, you might get a different sentencing.
Something akin to attempted murder, I think, would keep stable, right?
Okay, just like the small stuff.
I think it really depends on a lot. Yeah.
I guess it will depend on what's passed. How's the so when you say they're authorities, what's the level of authority they have in terms of like? So right now the mayor has the council to pass authority. Is it the same level that would be for each mayor?
Right back.
For their respective municipality.
Correct.
It would be.
But if they actually agree upon it and they come to agreements, they'll be recognized statewide.
Okay. So what if it was legislation just for like, is it only criminal based, or can they do I don't know, say rights based stuff where it's like, changing how searches work or whatever? Can they push something to be statewide?
If they're in agreement, yeah.
Sure, in agreement. But essentially, we still have the base constitution, which will have individual rights that are outlined and declared. And if a municipality were to bring about laws that could question the unquestionable rights of a citizen, obviously it could be reviewed and challenged and struck down based on that measure.
I mean,
So
I think at the end of the day, the fact that anybody can have a review put in is probably what the people needed all along. And it's not. I mean, it's funny that certain people are leaving before this comes in, but like now, when we see a dumb decision or something that's stupid, we have a way to, I guess, speak or have the people speak for us. So that's at least how I felt stuck in a hole for the last 3 weeks. Not being able
think
to,
it'll be
to
more
do anything because the
like
power structure's in a way where
jaywalking.
only we
Like, think
are
about it. You
accountable
could think
for
about
the-
it
for the
like
law, and,
there's no
police
such
aren't
thing
prosecuted,
as
judges aren't
jaywalking in
necessarily
the city,
prosecuted.
right? That was
Everybody has a different
decriminalized.
level, and
But maybe
obviously being
jaywalking would be a
officer
thing in the
before this,
county.
I understand. I'm not trying to detain police officers because
Maybe
there's
like
a
speed
bit more
limits
to
would
it
be
than that, but
different.
not everybody has the same
like
morals.
You can
but,
only
if
go
we got a
55
path
miles
out,
an hour in
then
the city.
I guess that's what the people
Then maybe
want.
you
If
can
the
go
laws become-
65 miles up
So,
north.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point there, and I guess I failed to mention there. If you're not following what he's understanding,
But I
is,
think like
this doesn't just apply to us, right? It is officers. Say, I'm just.
I don't know how that'll work with like
I don't
charges
like
though,
it.
and like
Just came
the.
up real quick. Say he does
I
something
think
that,
probably like
or
maybe
enact
everything
something,
that's
whatever
like
the hell it is,
already
you
in
don't
the
have evidence with it,
penal
you can
code will stay the
initiate that
same
review on him
across.
as well.
Because
Everybody.
like,
I mean, everybody.
what
would
would
be
they
subject
do?
to
Would they have like a
Not just-
charge
So-
for the city and a charge for
if
the
a
county?
police officer, EMS, anybody did something somewhat questionable that we couldn't.
I can speak to that. So I have actually been appointed before he resigned as the overseer for the police, which is not what it sounds like. It's actually an acronym. Essentially a prosecutorial authority that oversees government employees like the police and EMS and whatnot. So say, for example, Den Shiesty were to go out there and try to commit some crimes on someone or steal things from them or attempt to murder someone, our body would be responsible for pushing charges against them and making sure that they're held accountable to the same letter of the law that everyone else in the city is held accountable to.
That right there is amazing to hear.
Can that start
Yeah.
now? Because there's a lawsuit that I'm going to put up for Den Shiesty, actually, for doing that exact thing.
Yes, I'm actually just been working on this oversight constitutional stuff with the rest of the justices. I haven't had much time to put thought into how this will be fleshed out, but it will be more than just me. It will be a department.
So, with there being 2 mayors and 2 counties, how would the whole council system work?
It's
Two
not
different
going to be a
councils?
thing.
Well,
No council?
So, well, the way you said it, right? The authorities can create a council, right?
Yes.
They still have the powers to do whatever they want. So, I assume if someone was to become mayor, they could say in their speech or whatever the fuck they're trying to sway what they're going to pass in legislation when they become mayor, and then it happens. So the council would be there, everything would be there if they wanted it there.
I
Oh, I-
doubt
correct,
that
yeah.
BCSO
So
would
if
be
you
Yes, the
limited
thing
just
with
to
it
the
is-
county.
Mayor of the city, you could say, well, there is no council, essentially.
You
I'm sure
can,
that
but
they'd
you then run
patrol
the risk of
both.
everything falling back on your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So
So
it
he has to
becomes,
pass that legislation and it would be seen, correct?
Correct. So, if you give or separate the power, the authority, the individuals, I mean, it's almost like, as a collective, you are one, but in regards to how people operate, if you consolidate it into one, the authority or the review that may happen will happen to you. But if you, as an individual, want to take that risk on, that is up to yourself. If you decide that you want to abuse that, then you are subject to be removed, most likely.
Is
To
the Constitution to-
understand, sorry,
Go-
just
go,
real
sorry.
quick. Am I, and this may not be exactly what you're asking, Kay. I think it's, maybe the question's more aligned with previously the cabinet was sort of like state level mandated division of voting power. With this new system, it sounds like the mayor, the cabinet is going away, and the mayor has a choice for a cabinet, but ultimately it does come down to a singular vote.
Well, he can
For
create
his
those
authority,
additional
yeah.
powers if he wants. I mean, he could create legislation creating these new positions.
So
I think what they're saying is that the judges become the body that pushes back against something that's unconstitutional or illegal as
Yeah,
opposed to the
yeah,
council
yes.
having dissent.
Not the only
Well,
body, mind you.
anybody
we'll be one
can.
of them. Yes,
Not the
by
only
the
right.
sound of it, so
we will just be one of them. That's our main purpose. But yes, anyone could oppose this stuff.
so
Further, it would incentivize you, Nino, to as you seek your political aspirations here, to flesh out what you believe a cabinet or a staff should be, so that if something were to come up after you're potentially elected, say there's an issue with the hospital, you have a medical advisor that it can maybe fall on instead of just yourself, right?
Yeah,
that's going to be on you to
absolutely.
flesh out.
I think so. If I'm understanding this correctly, there is no council anymore. You have the choice for a cabinet.
There is no state mandate.
Okay.
Yes,
There's
that's
nothing
right.
to say that you can't create your own. There's no longer a council of 8 that is everybody.
The
So-
second question I got is, what is the state level voting structure? How do you prevent the deadlock?
What do you mean, in terms of like creating laws between municipalities, or?
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, there's going to be certain areas of the law that affect the island itself, right? So previously you had the council. Now, from my understanding, there's going to be 2 mayors. That's 1 vote each. They got to agree for a change of higher levels of legislation. How do you prevent a deadlock when it's a 1-to-1 vote?
The legislation that you'd be seeking to propose would be enforced on a local level, and it would be adapted. It would be adopted as state level, should both sides agree. It's not saying that you can't create legislation and enforce it in Los Santos if you're the mayor of Los Santos, right?
Let
It's
me
just
give you.
that wouldn't necessarily apply to the county.
I'll give a more practical example, right? Gun legislation, right? One county says non-felons should be afforded the right to a weapon. The other county says it doesn't. Is it deadlocked now for 3 months?
Well, depends on the county, right? You can change it for your local county if you're the mayor, because you're the authority there, or is it
Yes,
not how it works?
something to consider is that you know, these differences between the counties would be what makes them so unique. You know, not everywhere is supposed to be the same, and so while you might define as deadlock, I would envision it as a different culture and a different community you're seeking to cultivate.
See, I was under the impression that the existing legislation would inherently be state level. But it sounds like
some matters
all
of
of
it will
these
be.
things.
Some will. I mean, we still have to go through and revise some things, but
So
not
is
everyone will.
the constitution? Is this the stuff you're talking about? Is that a new constitution, or is it what is this all based off exactly? The authorities and whatnot. Is it just changing our constitution, or what's the? How's that work?
So there is a modifications to the current existing constitution, but the main thing is essentially re-amending and adding a bunch of new articles to it and
I
removing
think it
ones
would
that are
apply to where the
superfluous or
crime
don't
was
really
committed.
belong in a constitution, to essentially add in and enshrine
And then like any
people's
additional
rights
crimes they
that they
committed
inherently
in the
have,
county
so that they're not just
would
you
be
know,
applied on
willy-nilly
like a
and can be
county
changed at
level.
will. You know, these are immutable rights that people have, and they always will
Yeah.
have.
So would we consider the constitution the law above legislation? So that's always
Yes. The
Okay.
Constitution is the supreme.
So
in the original
legislation can't go
document.
against the Constitution,
That
like
is
it is
correct.
currently, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, with the appeal thing, is that so? Can you only appeal to review or whatever you said it was on a person, or can you also do it on a piece of legislation? Like, can we group signatures or something and force a vote or something to change legislation that we don't agree with
Yes,
as a
you may.
people?
There's an avenue for constitutional law review. Maybe not necessarily outside of the confines of a traditional trial. The constitutionality of a law can be challenged itself.
If
Interesting.
you want to
It
assemble
probably
people,
wouldn't
which is
be-
your right to assemble, and for example, to petition 2 or 4 things to be changed, there is a discussion as to how many those are right now, but those will be heard. Now, is that too many, too little? Or what is that threshold? That's up in the air. But yes, if people do assemble with something that's common that they would like to change, they have the power to contest that.
Okay.
I have a
Sounds like a democracy.
Something like that.
I have a
Fundamentally
question.
speaking,
How
Go
did
for it.
how was there legislation passed that
Hey,
went
kids,
against the
have fun.
Constitution?
Hi, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Can you give Ellie a call? I'm not at the warehouse, but last time I talked to her, she was.
All right, sounds good. We'll do that.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right, bye bye.
Is that Judge Bailey here has been writing some very harming or inducing harm to the actual governments or structure that we have. And you can cite those and provide the evidence of what things have happened. You can initiate a review on my own big.
But who reviews it?
Basically anybody can be impeached or I guess punished. Is the idea.
When you ask who reviews it, from my understanding, for judges specifically, I believe it would go to a independent third-party review that is not of the state.
Okay. And what was the issue of how my question is, how was it even possible that legislation that went against the Constitution was being passed? Was that because of Crane or other laws
Well,
that are in place?
Can you specifically refer to what legislation that would be?
Well, Soze
I'm not
has
sure.
a bunch of them, but the one I can remember off my head is the, for example, the business law. In the Constitution, it says states you need to have a warrant presented to you to have any type of raid
Lawful
done, yada
search.
yada yada. And then on the business law, it states they can raid your property anytime they want.
Sure. So I guess the only thing I could really say under that is in the past there wasn't an enforcement mechanism for us to necessarily challenge that. However, I can imagine that, let's say, for example, you had a business and the police searched it and you wanted to sue for the constitutionality of it. I imagine you probably could have, and I would have been willing to entertain it. I don't know how it would have been entertained, but I think that it's possible the DOJ could have struck it down as unconstitutional.
Isn't that essentially what your
So-
whole case
We've
was
got
about, Soze?
There's yes, well, sure. There's a lot of things with inconsistencies on, you know, I wasn't sure if the Constitution was considered the same level, what it was, and honestly, I don't think it really matters at this point. The reality of it
Yeah,
is,
I
for me,
agree.
if we can push forward and actually see everything that's changing and vote to remove it or revote to remove somebody if they abuse power, we're resolving all the issues we had that we feel, well, I feel created this situation. You know, we've got I don't want to necessarily make you guys panic or anything, but I am not confident that everybody who voted on council legislation actually read the oath, which is a requirement for them to be able to join the council. So, if that's the case, I'm not sure any legislation would even be legal if that was to, you know, go over. Maybe Murphy could tell us there. Does everybody say the oath that joins the council? Every single person?
Like
Nope.
say it out loud on like a book or something.
Crane, the mayor, everybody.
I was never
Anybody
sworn
that's in
in.
the council.
I can say that right now. I was never sworn in, and I should have been.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
So people voted on legislation that weren't a part of the council, sat in on meetings that weren't a part of the council, and well, every piece of legislation is I guess not done how it was intended.
I mean, I wouldn't say every piece, but if that is indeed true, I would say that there's essentially some very serious foundational questions about a lot of them, yes.
Did Crane ever say the oath to join the council?
I don't think any of us were actually available to see that unless
The
it
council was
public
created
knowledge.
before I was even hired as a judge, so I couldn't answer.
Yeah, I didn't know if
He was,
Murphy or
the
someone
interim
was there. So.
manager prior to the formation, so he was like grandfathered in. I don't know. I don't think
So there
anybody
are
was
no
there.
laws
I don't want to
right
speak.
now.
I don't
That's
want to
not
speak on
true.
his behalf. He
Well,
may
the
have,
Constitution's
or may
there.
not.
It's authority, no matter what. So. I'm just like
okay.
I'd have to question it. I mean, listen,
That's fair.
if the council legislation does say that the council needs to vote on something for it to be, you know, law, then maybe there is a very questionable thing due to their whatever the fuck oath that they meant to say to even join the council. I believe it's the second council post says they all need to say the oath to be recognized as a council member or some bullshit.
I mean, yeah, that might be a good argument for us to review and go through these legislation pieces again.
Like I said, I'm not saying this because I want to go sue people. I'm saying this so you guys can understand that there might be bigger things you need to worry about if some of that legislation is iffy. That's all.
I appreciate that. I mean, we were very likely going to do an internal legislative review and probably remove stuff that didn't fit anymore. So.
I mean,
Wait, so who's gonna...
I was gonna say at the end of the day, if the legislation makes sense, there ain't no point removing it anyway. If it's gonna tie into whatever you guys are doing, so.
Well, there may be parts of it that are no longer accurate. For example, like the business one that you cited, Mr. K, was the mayor signing off with the Chief Justice. That obviously would have to be altered.
Okay, so that shouldn't have happened, is what you're saying.
Well,
no,
the
I'm
Chief
saying those things
Justice
still have
would
to
have
be
done it.
reviewed there.
Right,
Okay.
right, but there was authority to do it if the Chief Justice signed it, so he technically had the powers either way.
Right. I'm
But
just
whether or
pointing
not
out
it's
that
legal.
If it changes at this point,
Your
the structure
guess
that we
is as
have,
good as mine.
that
I
also
don't know
needs to be
anything.
adapted to the structure to
I'm
be
just
fitting.
learning this
Right,
with you
right.
The
guys.
situation we're in.
There's still a lot of paperwork to be done, basically.
Yeah, sounds like it.
With
Well-
that being said, stop shooting us up. Thank you.
Well,
It's hard to do
I
paperwork
gotta-
when you can't meet.
I got two questions. One is, with the new constitution, has there been any thought about wiping everyone's records?
I don't really see why that would be necessary. The penal code's not really changing.
New constitution infers new state.
Well, it's
The
amended.
state's
It's
not
not a
changing.
new constitution.
Oh,
so-
amended. Okay,
The-
amended.
Yeah, they said they were amending it.
Yeah,
That's why I
so
asked as well.
the state authority is not changing. It's still the state that incarcerated people in the past.
Look,
the
I'm a
same
lawyer. You know, I got to
authority-
try. If I could wipe everyone, that'd
I
be the biggest
understand.
lawyer W ever.
I completely understand, but we already have processes in place for expungements, and I believe pretty much anyone here could qualify for one if they really wanted it. So
The second question I got is I want to go back to the like the example about the weapon license, right? It's not very I'm only using that as an example. Now I can understand the issuance of them being local. But given that there's county lines, is the inference there that the police department would effectively need to see whether any crime that is transpiring remains in the confines of a of like LSP Los Santos or Blaine County and does not cross county lines during said incident?
I'd
You
like
get what I'm saying?
to-
yeah, I understand. So
I'd like to remind
essentially, the way
everybody
that
to
the
keep it
jurisdictional authority
positive.
is written up
If
is
you're gonna
that
make
each
snippy little comments in
enforcement
chat,
agency has
I'm gonna ban you.
jurisdiction, quote
So
unquote, over
chill
their
out.
respective county. If I were to, for example, shoot Bailey in the head and then flee to the city,
People
and
are-
police officer,
are
the sheriff's department was chasing me
Learning,
the whole way,
enjoy
and
the
then they arrested me
RP.
when I got
If you
to,
don't enjoy the
you know,
RP,
the
you can go
city,
somewhere else.
They could
That
still
was
arrest me. They still have authority to enforce the laws.
Mhm.
But when they're within the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles Police Department's
It's okay.
jurisdiction,
But let's just keep
the
it positive.
LSP essentially take a priority, and they have say over the
No,
conduct of the
everybody
officers while they are there.
can have an
So,
everybody
say, for
can have an
example,
opinion.
The LSPD have internal policies that restrict pitting over 40 miles an hour, and a BCSO deputy were to come in and do that, and they had different policies, and they pit someone for that respective speed, they would be then held liable to those new standards. Essentially, agencies need to comply with each other in the way that they enforce their own agencies and their policies, or else they could be found liable and potentially sued for that.
Absolutely, but I guess
and
the question
punished
is,
internally as well.
would the charging of said individual would it be based on where the crime originally occurred, or does it include where it crosses?
It would be where it originates from. So the BCSO would charge me for the shooting here, not for whatever LSPD has in there. Say they had different laws in place for it.
I
So,
gotcha.
So it will be important for the police to dictate and understand
Will
where
you
crimes
stream
were
tomorrow?
committed
Yeah.
and
So I'm
back it
planning
up
on
with evidence.
streaming
Does that
earlier
include
in
if
the
the
day
crime
tomorrow.
continues into another county? By the way, I'm not trying to be pedantic
No,
here.
I
I'm
understand
trying to
completely.
best
But
understand like where the line
Just
is
because I
between.
think
I know
later in
obviously
the day there's going to be
Constitution's gonna remain
fireworks. It's
state
going to be
level, and there's
super
gonna be
loud.
Some things that are going to remain state. I'm trying to
So-
visualize where that line sort of ends.
Yeah,
I kinda
it's
wanna
not
go
either
watch
or, Okay,
fireworks.
so let's say that there's state laws that says it's illegal to shoot people, and the BCSO and the Los Angeles County and Blaine County don't have any specific laws about that. Just because the shooting people occurred in Blaine County and then shooting occurred in Los Santos County, doesn't mean that the actual punishment would change. Now, say for example, you committed criminal offenses in one county that had differing penalties, you very likely would just be subject to whatever is higher and not both. So, say for example, I can't think of a crime off the top of my head or an example, but let's say that there was a crime in Blaine County that had like a 20-month
is the 4th of July tomorrow.
and the same crime
Well,
in
happy
LS
birthday.
County was
You know, stay
25 months
safe.
and $3,000.
Drink some water.
And that crime occurred in both places, you would probably just be subject to the one count of it in Los Santos County and not both. So you wouldn't be charged twice for the same thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But
So-
a lot of this has not been fully fleshed out and written in yet. This is just my understanding of what we discussed.
Were you gonna say something else, Nino?
I was gonna
Please.
say, I feel like we're
go.
being a bit optimistic about officers then learning two SOPs when they can hardly understand their own.
Well,
How are we gonna?
an SOP is just
Or
a
even law.
procedure thing.
Yeah,
It doesn't really
that-
matter.
The SOPs are different from the law.
mean,
essentially.
both.
The police
I guess
officers
it's-
need to know their laws, and they frankly should know how different counties operate because that is their responsibility. And we can sit here and say, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice if they were? I'm tired of wouldn't it be nice? As I think that they should put in the effort to learn these differences, and they should be willing to do that because that is their job. And if they're not cut out for the position.
I'm gonna be honest.
Rick.
Listen, if we can make fucking laws and constitution in one page, and these SOPs are 5,000 pages, you've already understanding the problem. They just need to be trained the fucking fundamentals of what they're meant to do: protect life. And that's a pretty good start.
Don't worry
there's
about
a
it,
good
stay
reason
hard,
not
you're
to
good.
T-bone a car onto the fucking highway or off a fucking mountain where you can't see where it's going, because you ain't protecting the people around you at that point. There's very simple things they just don't fucking do. That's all they need to do. I can only imagine how many fucking pages their SOPs are. That's why nobody fucking knows.
You don't
them.
need to imagine. It's about 31 pages. I wrote most of them.
Whoa!
Are you serious?
Yes, I am serious.
Someone wrote 31 pages of SOPs.
I wrote most of them, yes, and they still use them to this day.
Oh
That's
my God.
that's the biggest issue, I
Jesus.
believe. It's not because people don't want to know them at the same time, but nobody's got to read 31 pages. But
In
Oh, well-
fairness, a lot of those pages are
Overcooked.
they're just examples and pictures and whatnot. The
Yeah.
actual basics are still very simple, but they can get lost in all the extra
exactly, that's the
nonsense
thing.
surrounding it.
Why the Constitution is good, because it gives you a foundation. And just like if there was a little page at the front of their SOPs, here's the core values, make sure these are priority. You're already naturally going to know most of your SOPs, because you got to think, am I doing safe things right now? Am I doing XYZ? It's just it's a much easier way to get the point across instead of having to read it off. Either way, I mean, that's probably something the police can discuss with themselves.
They'll figure it out.
I guess
Go ahead. Finish
I was
your
just gonna say I was like, my concern is giving them too much credit. I mean, we have officers that don't even understand the difference between RS and PC.
We've always had that, frankly.
And as established, Rick, again, there'll be the opportunity to challenge that authority and submit it forward for review if you're in a situation.
So, the better solution is just in the Constitution have a form of due process that is the necessities that they are bound by law. I would say would be good. I mean, we can all describe what RS or PC is going to be, right? So if it's just in legislation, then the fuck can they do? They have to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
The police exist essentially as an enforcement mechanism of the state. They don't exist separately from it. They're there to enforce the laws and to do it in a safe and effective manner. And if they can't do that, then they'll be removed.
Well, maybe it
They don't
is
need to understand
like
the law, but they do need to know RS and PC.
I agree with you. 100%. I agree with you. But something that we need to understand is that a lot of people that made the training programs in the past are no longer doing them. For example, I don't train these guys anymore. And I can tell you when I was their boss, they knew very well the difference between PC and reasonable suspicion. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of loss of care for the standards internally, and that is their cross to bear and not mine. But it's just something to consider that it is a fundamental lack of quality in their internal high command structure that has led to this. So
somebody shot 2 officers in the head in the middle of the apartments with a gun that was tied to somebody, and nobody got a warrant or a report about it.
I believe
It
it.
wouldn't have happened to
I
be you
do
who
believe
just
it.
looked at her. Was it Soze?
I believe it was what's his name? Conan Clarkson. He was
Oh, yes,
shooting cops for
Mr.
some reason.
Clarkson.
Yeah.
A member of PD shooting another
Wait,
member.
we were in the
Actually, I
same
wouldn't put that past
academy.
him.
The reality for what I think is the issue, like I said, the fundamentals just need to be trained into people, and that's just where they grow from. I have walked
agree.
down as soon as I came back to this fucking city, okay? I saw police driving faster than everybody through red lights without the lights on the sidewalks, doing whatever the fuck they wanted. There was not fucking one police
Shameful.
officer that drove past me that I thought you would be getting fucking reamed out the butthole right now and fucking cited or something. There wasn't one. Everybody was just fucking around and doing whatever. If you allow that sort of laziness just in driving and general etiquette within the public, just imagine what the police work is going to be like.
It grows
You
and
already
grows and
you already
grows.
see it.
Well, here's my opinion. I think the police have an open disdain for the law. I watch police officers intentionally not going after people who are speeding back and forth in front of them, and when I called them out on it, they immediately drove away and lied to their high command when I reported the incident to them. And
Oh, tickets do not exist anymore. I can tell you that.
I agree. There is no respect for the law. There is no respect for the rule of law from the police. And in my opinion, the police are an elevated street gang with state authority.
How often do people get raided?
It just depends on the person, Soze.
I mean, we hand out, we look over the ones that do happen, and this is not by all means down to statistics, but I would say we sign on general more subpoenas than we do raid warrants. It is very rare. And I will say, my own person had a weapon of mine stolen. This individual did report that they even stole it from me via 911. Not only do you have the source of who did it, not only do you confer with myself, not only do I have the serial number that I gave to PD and said to them there's better damn result on a raid. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, I'm sure that this can all be fixed as we continue on with our constitutional amendments, which I think is what we're here to discuss, and not really the uselessness of the PD. This.
I think the police need their own shit. Yeah, they can look at that. It's, yeah. I mean, it's hard to blame people enforcing the law when the law was pretty somewhat messy to begin with. At the end of the day, we're all the product of the environment, so I mean,
it's true.
Hopefully they can see the change and we can all change.
Amen to that, brother.
Here's what I want to say with this. And this is what I'm going to ask of you in your respective areas that you may represent, criminally, whatever, defend if you're a lawyer, or enact if you're the criminal themselves. Could you give us some time and some leeway so at this point, like, what it's done is done. You have the bare bones at this point, the people that are trying to actually do something with this. Can we say enough is enough right now?
I don't think anybody's
of shooting, you mean?
You talking to me, Bailey?
I'm talking to everybody, and I know that there are criminal defense lawyers here as well.
Should be
well, I'm not going to stop fucking defending people for their rights, if that's what you're asking.
This rolls into the question I've been wanting to ask.
Always thought you were slick.
Okay, I've only really been shooting Siobhan and Mayor Max's people because I think they're corrupt pieces of shit that have fucking got us in this hole. 2, with the mayor being absent for over about 2 weeks now, is there talks of maybe a temp mayor coming in until the elections, or whoever the deputy mayor was stepping in? And 3, what's going to happen with the current council? I mean, we got Solomon, who's been suspended for over a month now and has no clue what's even going on. I don't know if you guys even know Solomon's story.
I don't know his story, no.
I mean, Solomon, please speak on your situation.
Listen.
Well, let's let Murphy can probably speak in a
there's an answer to everything here has been answered. We can all do a review when this shit comes out, so we just need it to fucking happen. What's stopping us from pushing a review as soon as it drops to change or ask as a request to have a new mayor voted in? There's nothing that would stop it if there's logic behind it, right? So
something to note is that the new election is coming up and very quickly, like it's about to happen. So I don't think we're going to put in a temporary mayor, an interim mayor.
How long do we have? And also, I do want to you guys hear Solomon's story, because what happened to him is a mess.
Sure. Let's answer your first questions, and then let's talk about that, because I can imagine it'll be a lot to talk about. So
not too much.
Okay.
Can I ask a question before that real quick too? Because I've got to ask it. If there's no if there's no interim mayor and hardly a council left, I have a case on docket for the DOC to reinstate. What's the point of that court case even going forward if there's going to be no council to reinstate, assuming we get a favorable verdict? Is there a plan for the DOC?
Don't know. There is, and I don't actually know what the point of your case is. I don't know.
Well,
frankly, you could leave it up, I guess, and maybe we'll pick it up as part of our discussions. But there's definitely some stuff changing with them. I don't think we've really solidified our decision though. So I don't really want to speak on it.
Is the case like civil oriented, or is it like pushing criminal charges? What's the actual case?
I mean, it's civil asking to reinstate the DOC due to failure to dereliction of duties.